Hello, welcome to the Minus One podcast. I am your host, Lizelle, and this podcast was named because there are some days where I feel less than fully myself or minus one of a person. I started this podcast because I am a fangirl at heart, I would say. Um, and I always appreciated when interviewers would ask my favorite artists really meaningful questions. And I just was hoping that maybe I could someday do that. Maybe even to my favorite artist, we'll see. um, and I also saw an interview between Timothy Chalamet and Harry Styles when I was younger. And I just really appreciated how they highlighted different parts of their careers very eloquently to each other. And yeah, I was hoping I could have that kind of meaningful conversation with someone or an audience, and maybe even a guest someday. As you can see, I'm in a different room. If you watch like my TikToks or even some of my YouTube videos, I would say, I'm actually in my sister's room, which is now my studio. um, yeah. So the first topic of my very first podcast is going to be growing pains. So I feel like growing pains is a really big part of my identity. Backstory: when I was younger, I used to cry all the time when a big change happened. I could never connect the dots. I guess I was like naive. But I would cry very randomly, and when my parents asked me what was wrong, I could never place my feelings. But I think it was always because I was going through a big change. I was starting middle school, high school. My mom couldn't take me to the line in the quad anymore. And actually, a funny story, my mom told me when I was younger, I don't remember this. I do remember being in the office. My mom told me that I actually checked myself in to the school therapist as an elementary grade kid. And that is so funny to me. Get therapy, guys. But yeah, I feel like growing pains is something I've always struggled with. I've always felt it physically through crying and emotionally because I was, I guess, very aware that everything around me was changing. When I was looking up growing pains, a lot of the articles talked about physical growing pains, like how you would get taller, your body would get lankier, you wouldn't know how to control your limbs, or you can just feel yourself growing. For example, I had to switch out school uniforms every school year because I grew so fast. I would grow so much taller. I was always the tallest girl in my class. I'm like average height. But emotionally, it's really hard because you have to grow into someone or into something, and you don't even really know your hobbies yet. And it can be really uncomfortable trying to be someone or something that you're not. In high school, this is a very vivid memory of mine. We were just joking around, and I tried telling a joke that wasn't really me, wasn't really my humor, but it was my friend's humor. So I tried telling that joke, and my best friend, who knew me probably the best out of everyone, turned to me and was just like, "You don't really have to force that. It isn't really you." And thinking about it, it really wasn't me. And it was really uncomfortable having to sit with, first, that embarrassment, but also that confusion of I'm trying to grow into someone else instead of grow into myself. It's really hard to know what does interest you or what fits you. and trying also not to be put into a box. With growing pains comes a lot of having to navigate what is your interest or what is other people's interests that you think you have to have. With social media, it's really hard to distinguish whether you like it or whether or not it's something society is telling you you should like. And with growing pains also comes feeling stuck and having to know when it's time to take action. I was reading a book, I forget what it's called. I was reading a book called Why Has Nobody Told Me This Before? And he was saying that when they first come to therapy, he tries to tell them when you feel this uncomfortable thought, when you feel sad, or when you're going through something, where do you feel in your body? And when I know change is coming, I feel it in my chest. It kind of feels like anxiety, but I also feel it in my stomach in the form of butterflies because I know that change is coming and it actually feels kind of nice, scary because you don't know what's coming, but nice knowing that what is coming comes with a new set of problems, a new set of ideas, a new set of even friends, and maybe even a new you. I tend to ignore this feeling though, especially since change is something that is so scary to me. It can take me years to get over something. There are some things I'm not even over. um, but I guess that just comes with the growing pains, no matter how long it takes. For example, I am 2 years post grad and I still feel pretty stuck. As of lately, I've been feeling that feeling in my stomach, which is why I've been posting consistently. I'm trying to go to the gym every day because I'm trying to listen to that gut feeling and try instead of trying to make it go away. The feeling is so intense now in my stomach and my chest. It feels like something good is coming instead of something bad. Of course, you never know if you're growing until you can look back and see a different circumstance. You'll find yourself alone and thinking how there's absolutely no way you can stay like this and move forward. I know that change is coming, especially when I find myself alone, thinking, are you gonna keep living like this? Not necessarily in a bad way every single time, but my body just knows it's time and that you're ready. You have the tools you need to keep growing. It's just up to you to use those tools. You can do something to better yourself every day. During the pandemic is when I probably, a lot of us felt this way, but it was probably the biggest turning point of my life. A lot of things changed. I didn't talk to my best friend anymore. I lost a lot of friends. I lost touch with a lot of friends. And I just knew that there was no way I could keep living the way I was already living. I made my first college friends, even though I'd been 2 years into college. During the pandemic is when I finally started seeing results with exercising. Just as a little fun fact, I used to be an INFP in the Myers-Briggs type, and then during the pandemic, I became an INFJ, and then it just kept shifting. I think I was an ENFJ at one point. It was INFP, INFJ, ENFJ, and now I'm an INTJ. And I think that one is really, really accurate. If you ask my sisters or someone who knows me really well, I think INTJ is closest to who I am. If you read the description, it's pretty funny. Because it says that INTJs prefer to figure out things on their own, and that's how I am. I did this much by myself. I'm sure I can figure out how to do everything else by myself. And that's not the answer, everyone. At least that's what my sisters keep telling me. It feels like you've been digging at a wall, nothing's been working, but the only way to move past it is to switch out tools. Even if the past tool has been with you through a lot of stuff and it has quickly become one of your favorite tools, it's time to put that tool to rest. It doesn't just change you. Growing pains also means the change of environment, change of people you're surrounded with, and even change of identity. We've talked about change of identity, but I think the growing pains that are hardest to accept for me personally, though, is environment and people. I know all my college friends, kids, students can relate, but there are some places where you just won't grow. And for me, I had to go to college to grow, even though it was so hard at first. I am such a homebody, and in college, I had to share dorms, I had to share a room, and that was something I was not used to. And even though I was so used to being alone and having my own room at home, being in a dorm quickly taught me how to live in a shared space, how to respect others' boundaries, how to communicate better, especially with a roommate, a random roommate. I've had 3 random roommates because I lived in a triple and then I lived in a double. You really have to set those boundaries and learn how to communicate. I wouldn't have done that if I just stayed at home because I would have been selfish and I would have been like, that's your stuff, this is my stuff, don't ever talk to me, your music's too loud, blah 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 blah. And it just really comes to show that everything is happening for a reason and you're growing into what you're supposed to be, who you're supposed to be. And something else that's just really hard to let go of is hobbies. When I was in high school, I actually was in volleyball, choir, ASB was also a big one. I was in a few clubs, and in college, I had to learn to give up some of those. They will always be part of my past identity. They're not always going to be a part of my. And the growing pains that hurt me the most personally, I talk about this a lot, but I'm pretty open about it, so it doesn't matter anymore. I've always had very codependent relationships and friendships. I've also been the kind of friend to give my all to my friends, even though I'm trying to give my all to everything, and that's just not healthy. And I guess that made me like overly attached because in my head, that anxiety is saying you don't know when you're gonna lose them, so you just can't lose any more friends. And that pain is still very evident in me. I still am so attached to all of my old friends that I've had, and I'm working on it. Because even though they were previously my friends, they're not my friends now. And that is a conscious decision either I made, they made, or we both made. But the truth of the matter is, there's no relationship, friendship there. And it really sucks. I think that's the one that hurts me the most. Knowing that you just can't call them up anymore, that it's never going to be the same. Past, present, and future has a lot to do with growing pains. The past, because it can really hinder you from growing. I know that the past has hindered me a lot from growing. Past traumas, past good memories turn sour, and the past really keeps you from living in the present and affects your future. Slay. I often forget to live in the present. I'm always thinking stressing over what I have to do for my future that I don't look at where I am right now. The present is such a beautiful thing because you're still here. While I use my past as a guide, a lot of the times for me, it's hard to differentiate. It's really hard for me to make that hard cut that my past is not coming into my present, that that's actually the past and I can't join them no matter how hard I try. And that's why I try to be present in my relationships, in my growth, my health, because if I'm worrying too much about the past, I won't be able to take care of my needs now. That's also just really selfish to the past me who wanted to be healthy, the past me who wanted to achieve the goals that I'm working on right now, the past me who wished that they had as many friendships as I had now to cultivate. I kind of forgot where I was. Okay, I guess I can just move into the next segment. First question: how have I learned to cope with growing pains? I think coping with growing pains is a lot of acceptance. Accepting that you can't change people's minds, accepting that you can't change the past, accepting that you gotta move forward. I think to cope with this, it's a lot of journaling. It's a lot of expressing your frustration, whether it's to a journal or to other people. Coping with growing pains is doing dumb things, not super dumb things, nothing dangerous, but doing dumb things and having to deal with the consequences, but knowing that if you didn't do it, you'd always be wondering what if. And I think growing is learning that it's better to have done something, having to live down the embarrassment of it, than having to wonder what if. And yeah, that's how I kind of cope with growing pains, knowing that I can't get the past back and I just gotta move forward. No matter how hard it is, no matter how embarrassing it is. Olivia, Miss Olivia, you were right. What have I noticed is the biggest obstacle to my growth? Myself, my mind, and I would say my people pleasing is probably the biggest obstacle to my growth. I'm always scared that if I do anything wrong, if I fail at anything, then people will stop talking to me or people will hate me because people have stopped talking to me. But I've had to learn that that pertains more to themselves than it does to me. So I think the biggest obstacle and the biggest growing pain is people pleasing, actually. I think I can only know what I want when I get to pull back into just my own mind and realize that, oh, I actually didn't want to do this. I just wanted to hang out with them, or I didn't actually want to do this. They wanted me to do that, or social media told me to do that. The cool kids were doing that. There are still cool kids when you guys are adults. I'm an adult and I know there's still cool kids out there. Okay, next question. Does it ever feel like you can't grow because of how messed up your past has been? Yes. A lot of the times it feels like I can't get out of a situation, and sometimes that is the case. Even they're just like, I'm so sorry, man. I don't know if I could have gone through what you've gone through, and you're so strong. I get you're so strong a lot. But I have learned that using it as an excuse not to grow is just hindering me even more. And then it'll become even more of a messed up past, and I don't want that. So I try not to use my past as an excuse. It's kind of bad, but for now, I have like blinders on, You know, the things in bowling that only lets the ball go straight ahead. I feel like I have those on right now because if I look to the past, I do get stuck in it. I dwell on it a lot because I'm in my head 24/7. I won't stop thinking about it. So yeah, um, my past, I have used it as an excuse not to grow, but I'm consciously trying not to. And this one is probably the hardest for me. It's how can I move forward when it feels like everything is changing? When I stopped talking to my best friend, a lot of things were happening when I stopped talking to my best friend. It's actually like right before the pandemic hit. And then I had to move back home. I found out that my dad had ALS that year as well. It was just a lot to process, even though that's one of the most significant years, I would probably say. I remember, or as much as I do remember, trauma. I remember growing up, I had a lot of those moments where it felt like everything was out of my control. And I don't know if that's one of the things that stresses me out, feeling like I have no control. Whenever it feels like everything's changing, that's when I feel like I start to spiral. Even the small things, like when I went from JV to varsity and I moved coaches for the first time, I remember my first few games were so bad. It felt like everything was changing. I didn't have my past coach to cheer me on. I wasn't on the same team anymore, and it just felt like everything was changing. And it really gets into your head, and it really just messes with your perspective moving from 5th grade to 6th grade. When I went into middle school, I moved schools and it got bigger. So it wasn't just the same people from my elementary school. And I remember having to form a whole new friend group. And it was really scary because I didn't have many friends as it was, but my friends would get new friends. And sometimes I wouldn't get along with them. And it just felt like moving forward, you just have to take it day by day. My best friend used to say this when I was having a hard time in college with classes. My best friend told me, take it day by day. If this class feels hard, then the next day it won't feel as hard. And then the next day won't be as hard as the last 2 days. And eventually it'll be okay. Having to move forward from when it feels like everything is changing is taking it day by day and taking it in small pieces, familiarizing yourself with one thing at a time. I think I'm gonna end it here. I don't know how I want to end these podcasts. I think I'm just gonna end these podcasts how I end my TikToks, and it's just love you, besties. See you next time.